A few days earlier, an effeminate man smiles brightly amidst a flurry of sparkles and roses as admirers scream in adoration. Watching from behind a pillar, Cynthia silently observes the spectacle with a completely blank and unimpressed expression. Staring at him, she honestly questions her past choices. Cynthia bitterly wonders why she ever liked a man like that in the first place. Waking up in her bed with a startled expression, Cynthia suddenly remembers her past life. She realizes that the world where she lived as Cynthia until yesterday is not what it seems. It turns out this reality is actually the very romantic mobile game she had played in her previous life. Staring intensely at her reflection in a hand mirror, the shocking realization finally dawns on her. She accepts that, sadly, she has been cast in the role of the villainous, Cynthia Ludren. She notes that Eddie Doris, the person currently surrounded by admirers, is one of the game's main romance targets. As girls gossip about Eddie sacrificing himself, Cynthia recognizes her role as the interfering fiancé from his route. The onlookers continue to whisper about how pitiful his situation is. A few years ago, the Ludren family, a Viscount house, was seeing steady improvements in its territory management. Consequently, as the heir to the family, Cynthia received numerous marriage proposals. Her father gleefully tossed away the letters, rejecting the obvious gold-digger attempts. Among the candidates, Eddie was chosen because she liked his unusually easygoing nature and thought they could build a good relationship. However, before long, he came to be known as a pitiful person by high society. With his sunset-colored hair and eyes, Eddie's maturing features made him look like a fragile, beautiful boy, causing his popularity among noble ladies to skyrocket. As the struggling Doris family received financial aid from hers, rumors spread that Cynthia forced Eddie into the engagement with money. Because the Ludren family only maintained superficial ties with other noble houses, they lacked the social capital to fight back. Unable to refute the rumors, Cynthia was labeled a villainous while Eddie was labeled pitiful. When jealousy toward a successful household takes precedence, even things that should proceed smoothly inevitably fail. If Eddie would just firmly deny being treated as a pitiful victim, the baseless rumors might actually settle down. Cynthia glares sharply, clearly frustrated by his utter lack of defensive action. Instead of defending her, Eddie simply smiles and thanks the girls for their concern. He pauses dramatically, baiting their attention even further. Basking in their screams of adoration, he smoothly tells them it is an honor to have such cute girls worry about him. Completely irritated, Cynthia silently fumes at his ridiculous and passive behavior. She desperately wishes he would defend her by telling them the engagement wasn't forced, but he merely smiles uselessly. Cynthia laments that the easygoing personality she once liked in Eddie has developed in the absolute worst way possible. Realizing the bitter truth, she acknowledges that the man she once admired has merely become an indecisive fool. Despite his flaws, she had once loved him devotedly and genuinely viewed him as her future husband. In the past, she even openly displayed her jealousy toward the swooning ladies who constantly surrounded him. Clinging to her misguided feelings, she had stubbornly rejected her own parents' suggestions to simply break off the engagement. All of that blind devotion lasted right up until yesterday. Disgusted by her past behavior, she wonders if some invisible force from the game had forced her to love such a pathetic man. Looking back, she knows she had simply tried her best to love her fiancé faithfully. She scoffs bitterly at the cruel irony that her faithful love earned her the title of a villainess. Deciding enough is enough, she resolves that there is no need to keep him bound to her or to endure this unreasonable situation any longer. For the sake of the Ludren family, she determines it would be far better to find a capable man who can actually support their territory as her future husband. Furthermore, she refuses to marry a coward who won't even stand up to defend his own fiancé. Realizing the engagement brings nothing but loss to her house, she decides she must consult the Doris family immediately to break it off. Although being popular isn't a crime and Eddie technically fulfilled his basic duties as a fiancé, she knows it is no longer enough. Accepting the financial consequences of her dissatisfaction, she braces herself to pay the inevitable penalty for breaking the contract. Confident in her family's support, she knows her parents will prioritize her future happiness over mere money. Staring wistfully into the mirror, she laments that she would have avoided this entire villainous trap if only she had remembered her past life sooner. With absolute certainty, she admits that she never would have chosen Eddie in the first place. Shaking off her regrets, she declares her mission to abandon the villainous role entirely and find a truly devoted man focused on the future. Pondering her new options, She begins to calculate how many unmarried noble sons are actually available. Suddenly, a cheerful voice interrupts her thoughts, asking if she thinks she will fit in at the academy. Startled by the sudden appearance of a bright-eyed girl, she pauses in shock. She instantly recognizes the captivating girl with sweet, peach-colored hair and eyes as the unmistakable center of the game's universe. With a sinking feeling, she realizes the game's official heroine has finally arrived. Although the player could name her anything in the game, she remembers that in this reality, the heroine is named Ellie. Digging through her game knowledge, she recalls that Ellie was an orphan from the slums taken in by a pitying baron. Putting the timeline together, she realizes today marks the exact day Ellie transfers into the academy to begin her story. Wondering which romance route Ellie will pursue, she remembers that every single male target comes with a doomed rival just like her. A sudden, brilliant epiphany strikes her as she widens her eyes in shock. Connecting the dots of the game's mechanics, a thrilling possibility crosses her mind. Smiling at the perfect loophole, she realizes that breaking her engagement tomorrow will leave Eddie completely free for the heroine to romance without any villainous interference. She considers that even if the heroine doesn't choose Eddie's route, at least one path would be healthier. Though initially confused by her reincarnation, she realizes that knowing the future might not be so bad if she can slightly improve the situation. She concludes that the heroine's romantic choices have nothing to do with her, resolving instead to pursue her own happiness. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, her heels clack decisively against the stone pavement. Turning her back on the past, she bids the heroine farewell and swears to pursue her own happiness. Her internal monologue is suddenly interrupted when a voice calls out her name. A girl reprimands her, demanding she respect Eddie's wishes instead of using financial aid to treat him like a slave. Cynthia silently wonders how things became so cruel, recalling the events of the next day. Confronted in the hallway, Cynthia coldly states that she isn't following the girl's logic. She directly asks the heroine what she means by calling Eddie a slave. The heroine looks at her with frustration, claiming Cynthia doesn't even realize her own cruelty. The heroine accuses Cynthia of forcing Eddie to abandon his own dreams to fulfill her selfish wishes for the sake of his family. With tears in her eyes, the heroine begs Cynthia to see how pitiful it is that Eddie doesn't even have time to talk with his friends. The emotional outburst leaves a heavy, awkward silence in the air. Cynthia is internally baffled, noting that Eddie always seems to enjoy chatting with his entourage. Though she doesn't recall forcing him to do anything, Cynthia calmly states she will confirm these allegations directly with Eddie. Dismissing the dramatic girl, Cynthia turns to politely leave the confrontation. The heroine shouts after her, accusing Cynthia of planning to threaten Eddie into obedience once again. The surrounding crowd begins to murmur, swayed by the heroine's tearful accusations. Cynthia internally admits that the heroine's terrifying ability to manipulate the narrative explains why the game's Villainous hated her. She notices with dread that the crowd of gossiping onlookers just keeps growing. Attempting to escape the spectacle, Cynthia politely excuses herself by claiming she has important business. The heroine dramatically gasps, accusing Cynthia of using her family's power to silence her. The heroine loudly declares her absolute resolve to save Eddie, confident that her righteous actions will be rewarded. Cynthia sighs inwardly, wishing she could just tell the crowd that her important business is actually breaking off her engagement with Eddie. She lets out a tired, exasperated breath at the exhausting situation. Staring at the steeled heroine, Cynthia wishes the engagement was already dissolved so she could simply send the girl away. Brushing past the girl, Cynthia formally acknowledges her feelings for Eddie but insists she truly does not have time right now. The gossiping crowd wonders if Cynthia is intentionally acting brave or just being distant by formally referring to Eddie. Walking away from the drama, Cynthia calmly concedes that she cannot blame the heroine for thinking that. Resolving to correct her past foolishness, Cynthia decides to dissolve the engagement as quickly as possible. Suddenly, a horrifying realization strikes her and leaves her visibly shocked. Raising a hand to her face, she pauses to process the gravity of the situation. She notes with absolute dismay that she is now dealing with two incredibly thoughtless people. She wonders how the heroine managed to capture Eddie's heart so quickly right after transferring into the academy. Sweating slightly, she marvels at the terrifying and reality-bending power of the game's heroine. Glancing away, she acknowledges that Ellie was the one who finally opened her eyes to the truth. She remembers all the personal goals, studies, and fun she sacrificed while enduring this restrictive life. Clutching her dress with a pained expression, she realizes just how much of her life she wasted trying to live up to his expectations. She silently questions why her true sense of self only manifested after the heroine pointed it out. Stepping forward decisively, she notes that he had never once spoken up about his own desires before this. While they were apart, she dedicated herself entirely to studying estate management, attending social obligations, and running inspections. She wonders what exactly Eddie was doing with his life during all that time she spent working. She concludes that his lack of ambition and opinions makes him completely unendearing to her now. Her eyes narrow sharply as a cold realization sets in. Breaking the silence, she formally and stiffly addresses Lord Doris. Turning to leave the chaotic garden, she calmly suggests they move elsewhere for their officially arranged discussion. She coldly assumes the Count has already informed him of the details and urges him to follow her. Completely snapping, Eddie screams that he is absolutely sick of this situation and has had enough. Clutching his chest in dramatic outrage, he refuses to attend, accusing her of planning to threaten his family with money once again. Cynthia stares at him with a perfectly dumbfounded expression, realizing he tuned everything out and doesn't even know the engagement is already broken. Pointing an accusatory finger, Eddie loudly berates her for oppressing him and arrogantly summoning a count's house as a mere viscount. Turning her back on his tantrum, Cynthia calmly explains that she summoned no one and the meeting is actually taking place at his estate anyway. Her eyes widen slightly as a brilliant tactical thought suddenly strikes her. She stares intently at the furious boy, her expression hardening into cold calculation. She realizes that if Eddie refuses to cooperate or discuss the matter properly, she can manipulate the situation entirely to her advantage. Standing before the whispering crowd, she plans to use his public slander to drastically reduce her family's engagement penalty fee. Smiling serenely at the numerous witnesses, she calmly states that her family never intended to threaten him with their financial aid. Sweating and desperate, Eddie yells that leveraging the aid money to make him obey was exactly a threat. Unfazed, Cynthia firmly declares that she has absolutely no recollection of forcing him to do anything or committing any wrongdoing whatsoever. Cynthia coldly confirms if he is demanding an immediate end to their engagement today, noting that while he felt threatened and treated like a slave to Lord Doris, it was something else entirely. Validating his own delusion, Eddie fiercely agrees and shouts that the Ludren Viscount house treated him like a slave. Turning his back in defiance, Eddie declares he has the right to be free and vows he is done being her toy forever. Unfazed by his outburst, Cynthia smirks and tells him his impressive words give her plenty of amusing ammunition to hold against him. Suddenly collapsing to the ground in a dramatic display, Ellie begs Lady Cynthia to acknowledge her mistake and set Lord Eddie free from his suffering. Looking down coldly at the pitiful display, Cynthia merely points out that Lady Ellie's uniform will get dirty. Hearing a soft mutter, Cynthia catches Ellie whispering that Eddie already belongs to her. Flashing a wicked smile, Ellie mentally taunts Cynthia to exit the stage, declaring that a villainess deserves a bad ending and cannot beat the heroine. Struck by the specific game terminology, Cynthia stares in shock as she realizes the transferred heroine might also possess memories of her past life. Misinterpreting Cynthia's stunned silence as a threat, Eddie fiercely throws his arm out to shield Ellie. Continuing his tirade, he accuses Cynthia of acting out of petty jealousy. He demands that she immediately stop interfering with his relationship with Ellie. Pausing at his accusation, Cynthia repeats the phrase, petty jealousy, with quiet realization. She mentally acknowledges that before regaining her past memories, she genuinely held romantic feelings for Eddie. She admits to herself that she had indeed been fiercely possessive and openly jealous of any ladies who came near him. However, she refuses to let him reduce all her genuine devotion and the financial support her family provided into mere malicious torment. Staring her down with false resolve, Eddie formally declares that he has made up his mind and is ending their relationship today. Instead of crying, Cynthia simply lets out a dark, amused chuckle. Realizing there is no point in arguing with fools, she decides to exploit this perfect opportunity to her own advantage. Adopting a perfectly formal tone, Cynthia smoothly offers her apologies to the young Lord Doris. She firmly reiterates that she never threatened him and that her family's extensive financial support was given entirely out of goodwill. Warning him that his brazen words will have consequences, she announces she will bring his exact statements to today's formal discussion with his father. As the surrounding students murmur in confusion about her claims, she notes mockingly that it is unfortunate Eddie will miss the official meeting. Flashing a dangerously bright smile, she tells him she won't force him to do anything and invites him to do exactly as he wishes. The two women share a tense, knowing Look as the true heroine and the self-aware Villainous silently acknowledge their war. Oblivious to the trap closing around him, Eddie happily embraces Ellie and celebrates his newfound freedom. Wishing them a lifetime of happiness, Cynthia sarcastically remarks they are perfect for each other and silently vows never to let them near her again. Turning on her heel, she excuses herself so she won't be late for the crucial discussion that will seal his fate. Later that afternoon, she hurries straight home to the Ludren estate and reports the entire disastrous confrontation to her parents. Upon hearing the unbelievable news of the young lord's foolishness, her parents sit on the sofa in absolute shock. Cynthia's parents decisively agreed to dissolve the engagement, declaring that a man who hurts their beloved daughter is completely out of the question. Following a formal discussion, the engagement was officially annulled under the supervision of a state mediator. Thanks to Eddie's final blunder, things proceeded entirely in her favor, resulting in no penalty fee and the return of some past support funds. Although Count Doris put up some initial resistance, overwhelming testimony gathered within days left him with no excuses, forcing his side to give up taking it to court. Realizing the tables had completely turned, Cynthia chose to end things cleanly rather than dragging the situation out just to demand a penalty. Stretching with a relieved sigh, she notes that the Ludren and Doris houses are now complete strangers and the Doris family will face considerable hardship from here on. She coldly accepts that the Doris family will simply have to endure their new reality quietly. Gazing down at a framed photograph on her desk, she silently reflects on a fading memory of their past smiles together. Bidding a final farewell to that sunset-colored hair, she permanently closes the chapter on Eddie and House Doris. A quiet moment of sorrow passes as a single tear slips from her eye while processing the end of their history. Placing the picture face down, she resolves that they must both live lives where they never cross paths again. Snapping back to the present with determination, she realizes she must quickly find her next fiancé now that the matter with Eddie is settled. She acknowledges that being a damaged noble lady with a broken engagement is only a disadvantage if she were attempting to marry into another family. Walking confidently through the estate, she declares herself the perfect candidate for landless sons since she is her family's heir. Her previous worries about Eddie's rumors causing difficulty proved entirely unfounded as eager suitors aggressively volunteer to marry her. Slumping over her desk with an exhausted sigh, she laments that dealing with so many potential candidates is incredibly tiring. Needing an escape from the pressure, she decides to go find a quiet place to think. Strolling through the empty garden paths, she finds the effort required to judge the candidates' characters and lifestyles completely overwhelming. She desperately wishes she could just view their character settings exactly like game data. Recalling the capture targets, she vows to deliberately avoid any man the heroine might pursue. Cynthia suddenly freezes in her tracks upon spotting an unexpected figure resting in the courtyard. She expresses mild surprise upon realizing that someone is already occupying the secluded spot. Deducing that turning back now would look suspicious, she decides to just pass through quickly. Observing the lone student on the stairs, she assumes he either likes solitude or lacks friends, very much like herself. While scanning his appearance, she immediately notices his striking, beautiful silver hair. Her critical eye catches his ill-fitting, wrinkled, and slightly dirty uniform, along with unkempt bangs that completely obscure his eyes. Despite his messy and withdrawn appearance, she feels a strange, lingering sense of familiarity. The missing piece of the puzzle abruptly clicks into place in her memory. She realizes with sudden shock that this is no ordinary male student, but a specific character from her past life's knowledge. Cynthia internally panics as she accurately identifies him as the villainous third son of a ducal house who specifically appears in the Crown Prince's route. Cynthia recalls the tragic backstory of the Duke's third son, noting how he was constantly mistreated and lived a pitiful life. She remembers how his unfortunate upbringing led him to become obsessively attached to the heroine who showed him basic kindness. The game revealed him as a Yandra character who tries to claim the heroine by force before inevitably being imprisoned by the Crown Prince. If the player failed the Crown Prince's route, this dangerous boy would kidnap the heroine and trigger a forced double suicide bad ending in the sea. Staring intensely ahead, Cynthia struggles to recall the exact name of this tragic figure. Approaching the blonde boy on the bench, she finally remembers him as Sharia Brooke, the third son of a duke. Meeting his cold gaze, she is startled when he sharply addresses her as Cynthia Ludren and asks what she wants. Flinching under his intimidating eyes, she nervously assumes he is displeased that a lower-ranking noble dared to call his name. Sweating slightly, She frantically tries to concoct a believable excuse to escape the awkward encounter. Bowing her head slightly, she formally apologizes for suddenly calling out to him. A tense silence falls over them as Cynthia stares at him in apprehension. The two remain frozen in a quiet standoff on the grand stone staircase outside the estate. Maintaining her composure, she gazes steadily at the isolated boy. Sharia simply looks back at her with a quiet, unreadable expression. Covering her mouth in mild panic, she mentally berates herself for engaging him without thinking. Breaking the silence, Sharia coldly addresses her by name and asks if she needs something from him. Shrinking under his piercing stare, she realizes her lower rank makes her sudden greeting highly inappropriate. Her mind races as she desperately searches for a polite excuse to extract herself from the situation. Gathering her courage, she quickly asks for his forgiveness for her abruptness. She gently explains that she noticed him sitting alone with his head lowered. Offering a polite smile, she claims she only spoke up because she was worried he might be feeling unwell. Sweating nervously but keeping her composure, she mentally congratulates herself for coming up with such a flawless excuse. To her surprise, Sharia looks away softly and genuinely thanks her for her concern. He politely dismisses her, assuring her that there is absolutely nothing for her to worry about. Cynthia stares at him in utter bewilderment, completely thrown off by his gentle demeanor. She notes that his calm and polite behavior completely contradicts his supposed identity as an obsessive Yandra. Processing the interaction, she realizes his response was remarkably straightforward and normal. Re-evaluating her game knowledge, she remembers that the heroine actually provoked his dark side first with suggestive behavior. Her expression darkens with sarcasm as she silently judges the heroine's supposedly lovely personality. Concluding her thoughts, she decides that Sharia's backstory is simply too pitiful for him to be inherently evil. A maid tends to a baby while a blindfolded duke turns away, reflecting the grim reality that the child was born to a servant. Despite his noble status as the duke's son, the boy receives no respect and suffers poor treatment within the grand mansion. Abandoned even by his own mother, the boy grows up without a single person to care for him. He becomes a deeply tragic character, cursed to be entirely isolated and alone from the very moment he was born. Starved for familial love, the lonely young man desperately studies late into the night to maintain top grades, hoping to finally earn his father's recognition. Then, amidst his endless despair and isolation, a specific person miraculously appears. That life-changing person is none other than the game's official heroine. Beaming brightly without mocking him as an unwanted child, the adorable girl becomes the very first person to fill his void of loneliness. However, the heroine's true motive for approaching him is merely to use him as a supportive stepping stone to boost her academic ability for the Crown Prince route. In tragic contrast, to the lonely boy, her existence means far more than a simple academic partnership. Cynthia observes him closely, realizing that his desperate struggles in such a harsh environment perfectly explain why his eventual devotion drove him completely insane. Suddenly, the young man snaps out of his thoughts, muttering a confused reaction as he notices her staring. He stares blankly in silence, momentarily rendered completely speechless by her presence. Realizing this encounter must be a stroke of fate, Cynthia hesitantly speaks up to catch his attention. She politely asks if she might borrow a little bit of his time. She specifies that she has been wanting to speak with young Lord Brooke, the brilliant student who consistently maintains the Academy's top grades. Smiling warmly, she admits she had hoped to have a conversation with him at least once. Startled by the sudden request, Brooke points to himself and asks in disbelief if she truly wants to talk to him of all people. Flashing a gentle smile, Cynthia quickly offers to leave at once if her presence is troubling him. Flustered and blushing, Brooke stammers out a denial, insisting that she is not a bother at all. Relieved by his response, Cynthia asks if she may sit beside him, to which he enthusiastically agrees. Just as she is about to sit down, Brooke suddenly panics and urgently tells her to wait. He rapidly pulls off his uniform jacket with a swift, decisive motion. Laying his jacket out on the rough stone steps, he thoughtfully invites her to sit on it instead. Blushing deeply at the romantic gesture, Cynthia thinks to herself about how incredibly gentlemanly he is. She mentally compares his devoted, hardworking, and considerate nature to Eddie's charming but flawed personality, lamenting that Eddie could never be this perfect. Recalling the game's plot, she remembers that the only reason Brooke eventually turned into a Yandra was because the heroine cruelly used him and tossed him aside. She formulates a brilliant plan, realizing that since he has no fiancé and no title, she can simply heal his wounded heart and sincerely stay by his side. She smiles with absolute certainty, convinced that this approach will turn him into an ideal husband who deeply loves his wife and grows alongside her. Thrilled by this perfect loophole, she realizes that choosing him guarantees she will completely avoid her doom as a villainous, especially since he lacks a happy ending route with the heroine. Accepting his thoughtfulness with a gracious smile, Cynthia internally resolves to use this opportunity to discover his true character. She gracefully sits on the stairs and offers to wash his uniform later before returning it. As he stares in stunned silence, she silently worries that he might not even possess a spare change of clothes. Looking up at him, she politely asks if he will not sit down. He firmly declines, stating it would be improper for an unmarried man and woman to sit too close, especially with someone like him. He thoughtfully adds that it is best to avoid any misunderstandings since she is currently seeking a new fiancé. Observing his strict boundaries, Cynthia is genuinely impressed by his sincere personality. Gazing up at his flushed face, she also acknowledges his striking handsomeness. She quickly concludes that he is truly exceptional since his deep thoughtfulness shows even in his careful word choices. Processing her words, he softly remarks that she actually knew who he was. He looks away with an embarrassed expression, admitting that his recent circumstances are nothing to be proud of. Cynthia smiles brightly and declares it an absolute honor to remember someone as outstanding as the young Lord Brooke who consistently maintains top grades. Thoroughly flustered by her praise, he frantically insists there is no need to be so formal with someone like him. Calming down slightly, he humbly admits that hearing such praise from her is a profound honor for him as well. A sudden rush of overwhelming emotion causes tears to well up in his widening eye. Cynthia softly observes the way his eyes are glistening with unshed tears. Relying on her past knowledge of the game, she easily pieces together exactly what he is thinking right now. She realizes that receiving positive acknowledgement for the very first time must be moving the perpetually lonely boy beyond words. She reflects that his raw emotional reaction is clearly not something achieved through ordinary effort. Continuing her praise, she tells him that the sheer dedication required to maintain those top grades at their academy is truly beautiful. Looking up at him with a beaming smile, she confesses her sincere admiration for his hard work. She humbly admits that even with all her own effort, reaching those top academic ranks remains incredibly difficult. Surprising her in turn, he reveals he has heard of her prudent territorial management studies and her careful planning for the future. He earnestly praises her for balancing her rigorous studies with her heavy responsibilities as the next head of her house. Cynthia is left utterly stunned that a man would so naturally respect her efforts instead of dismissing her as an impertinent female heir. Deeply moved by his genuine validation, she stammers out a heartfelt thank you. Flustered by the unfamiliar praise, she nervously touches her cheek while assuming her face must be completely red. She anxiously wonders if her voice was trembling as she spoke. Desperately needing to change the subject, she blurts out that his silver hair is so beautiful when catching the sunlight that she couldn't help but stare. His eye widens in absolute shock as her sudden, glaring compliment strikes him straight in the heart. Sharia looks away nervously and asks if she found his white hair unpleasant. Startled by the sudden question, Cynthia simply stares back and utters a confused sound. Recovering her composure, she asks what he means and firmly states she has never found it unpleasant. Sharia explains that he was told his old man-like white hair was unsettling when he was removed from her list of potential fiancés. Completely blindsided by this revelation, Cynthia exclaims in utter shock. She mentally panics, recalling that she looked through every single marriage proposal and never saw one from him. Frowning in thought, she wonders if her parents hid the proposal on purpose, though she doubts they would do such a thing. Sharia clarifies that he was never even raised as a candidate, referring back to when she was only 10 years old. He adds that it was after that time when Eddie Doris, the Count's son, was officially chosen as her fiancé. Understanding finally dawns on Cynthia as she realizes he is talking about events from years ago. She admits that as a young girl charmed by Eddie's gentle personality, she failed to properly consider the other young lords. However, her expression sharpens as she realizes that even her youth doesn't explain this misunderstanding. She firmly declares that she has never once thought Lord Sharia's hair was unpleasant. Looking incredibly determined, she swears that she has never said any such hurtful thing. Realizing his brothers must have been mocking him with lies, Sharia apologizes for bringing up something so strange. Cynthia clutches her chest painfully, realizing exactly what kind of cruel treatment he has suffered at home just from that resigned reaction. She recalls from her game knowledge that his silver hair was a trait inherited from his mother. She remembers his tragic setting, where the people of the ducal house constantly mocked him for his appearance. Flashing a brilliant smile, Cynthia tells him that she finds his silver hair to be incredibly beautiful and lovely. She gently explains that her parents' hair has started to show white, and mixing it in as an accent color looks quite elegant. Continuing her warm encouragement, she predicts that if white strands ever mix into his silver hair in the future, it will be wonderful. She beams at him, promising that he will become a very charming older gentleman with hair like sparkling, shining snow. A stunned silence falls over the staircase as Sharia stares at her in absolute awe. Overwhelmed by her genuine compliment, he blushes furiously and covers his lower face. Still blushing deeply, he softly thanks her with a genuinely touched expression. Watching his flustered reaction, a sudden realization clicks into place for Cynthia. She happily concludes that beneath his supposed Yandere exterior, he is actually a very adorable person. Suddenly, rushing footfalls echo nearby as a voice calls out to the Lady Viscountess. A young man arrives panting heavily and quickly apologizes for being late. Cynthia turns toward the newcomer, her face breaking into a bright and welcoming smile. Blushing softly, a handsome young man flashes a gentle, captivating smile. Looking back, she notes that their unexpected encounter took place right there in the serene back garden. Following that fated meeting, the two consistently promised to see each other the next day, repeating their rendezvous over and over. Standing close together, they share a quiet, intimate moment as he gazes down at her. Noticing the folded cloth in her hands, Brooke curiously asks his lady what she brought. Holding up the patterned blanket, Cynthia cheerfully acknowledges his question. She warmly reminds him that every time they met on these stone steps, he gallantly laid down his own jacket for her. Unwilling to let him keep sacrificing his uniform, she reveals that she brought her own cushion to sit on from now on. Looking slightly dejected by her preparation, Brooke softly mutters his understanding. Confused by his sudden shift in mood, Cynthia tilts her head and wonders what is wrong. Turning his head away to hide his expression, he quickly denies that anything is the matter. Internally, he laments that her independence leaves him with nothing left to do for her. Realizing the depth of his earnest nature, she mentally swoons while he quietly admits to feeling a little lonely. Reflecting on another recent encounter, she remembers a day she ran late and found him waiting patiently in the pouring rain with an umbrella. Hurrying toward him through the downpour, she called out his name. Apologizing profusely for keeping him waiting, she explained that her conversation with the teacher had unexpectedly run long. Sharing the shelter of his umbrella, he sighed with relief and told her how glad he was to see her. Blushing deeply, he shyly confessed his fear that she might not have come to meet him at all that day. Struck by his vulnerability, her heart pounded so violently that she nearly short-circuited. Completely overwhelmed by his sweet confession, she desperately held back a strange squeak of affection. Stealing a quick, nervous glance, she tries to compose herself. Meeting her eyes, he offers another breathtakingly gentle smile. Returning to the present, she marvels at how perfectly their conversations flow, praising his thoughtful opinions on both studies and territory management. Impressed by his capability, she recalls hearing that he even expertly assists with the ducal family's endless paperwork. Enjoying their endless chats, she realizes she never grows bored in his presence. Yielding to her growing feelings, she admits that the more they talk, the more powerfully she is drawn to him. Calculating his incredible potential, she visualizes how perfectly he would help protect the Ludren household's territory if he became her partner. Gazing at a vision of their shared future, she imagines them as a deeply supportive couple, just like her own beloved parents. Smiling with quiet certainty, she acknowledges that despite their brief acquaintance, she can easily picture spending her life with him. Comforted by his warm presence, she silently vows to keep seeing him, eagerly anticipating their meeting tomorrow. Cynthia internally confesses her deep desire to keep talking with him like this forever. Breaking the comfortable silence, she softly calls out Lord Brooke's name. She asks him directly if it is troublesome for him that she invites him out every single day. Flustered by the sudden question, Brooke frantically denies it. He insists with absolute certainty that spending time with her would never be a bother. His expression suddenly shifts into one of deep, self-deprecating seriousness. Looking down nervously, he asks if she doesn't find it boring to talk with someone like him every day. Cynthia violently rejects his insecurity, declaring that being bored by him is absolutely impossible. She passionately insists that there simply isn't enough time to enjoy his company. Desperately wanting to hold his hand, she forces herself to hold back since they are not officially engaged yet. Calming down slightly, she warmly assures him that talking with him is truly very enjoyable for her. Blushing softly, Brooke smiles and asks her what they should talk about today. She immediately counters by eagerly wondering what they will talk about tomorrow. Stepping closer, she confesses that waking up and thinking about talking to him warms her heart. Completely overwhelmed by her proximity, a heavily blushing Brooke nervously points out that she is standing a bit too close. Ignoring his flustered state, she steps even closer and demands he promise to continue meeting her. Brooke completely freezes up, his face burning bright red under the intense pressure of her closeness. Staring at his flushed face, Cynthia mentally swoons over his adorable reaction and wishes his bangs weren't hiding it. Yielding to her overwhelming presence, he stammers out a quiet promise to keep meeting her. Satisfied with his answer, she smiles gently and accepts his word. She internally continues to gush over how incredibly innocent and adorable he is. She openly expresses her profound happiness that he made that promise. Beaming with joy, she tells him that she is already looking forward to tomorrow. Brooke blinks in mild surprise at her enthusiastic statement. He gently begins to correct her excited planning. Cynthia is left completely stunned when he reminds her that tomorrow is actually a day off. Deeply embarrassed by her eager blunder, she apologizes and admits she was just too excited for their time together. Looking away with a shy blush, Brooke softly confesses that he feels the exact same way. Recovering her composure, Cynthia suggests they meet again next week in the same place, to which he happily agrees. They bid each other a fond farewell until the following week. Staring downward with a darkened expression, Sharia stands alone in heavy silence. Back in her room, Cynthia flops dramatically onto her bed with a heavy sigh. She buries her face deep into her patterned pillow to hide her frustration. Sighing again, she complains that her days off are supposed to be far more enjoyable than this. Gripping the fabric tightly, she admits that simply not being able to see Sharia makes her day unbearably boring. Rolling over to stare blankly ahead, she silently wonders what he is doing right now. Gazing softly, she reflects on how surprised she is to have grown so attached to him in such a short time. She questions if her urgency was merely because she was rushing to find a new fiancé after breaking her engagement with Eddie. Looking back at their meeting on the steps, she confesses that her initial decision to speak to him actually involved calculated motives. Smiling warmly at the memory of his face, she realizes she would have been drawn to him regardless of her original intentions. Sitting up and hugging her pillow, she anxiously wonders if she is the only one who desperately wants to see him. She logically reminds herself that his promise to meet her every day does not guarantee he has romantic feelings. She knows his home life is terrible and that he has very few people who treat him with basic decency. Looking down with a pained expression, she considers the depressing possibility that he only talks to her because he is starved for conversation. Suddenly, her eyes snap wide open as a horrifying realization pierces her thoughts. Clutching her chest in mounting panic, she remembers that he is trapped with his heartless and abusive family at this very moment. Overwhelmed with worry, she desperately wishes she could run to see him right away. Without hesitation, she lunges forward and aggressively grabs her door handle. A sudden dose of reality hits her and freezes her entirely in her tracks. Slumping against the closed door in utter defeat, she painfully accepts that she cannot just barge into a duke's estate since she isn't even his fiancé. Pressing her face against the cold wood, she whispers his name in deep distress. Her mind races with anxious thoughts about whether he is currently feeling sad or losing his confidence. She vividly recalls how his mature and handsome face transforms when he flashes that adorably shy smile. The terrifying thought that his beautiful face might be wet with lonely tears torments her. Closing her eyes tightly, she fiercely wishes for nothing more than to see him keep smiling. Clutching her dress with absolute resolve, she decides she wants to be the one who makes him happy. Blushing deeply, she struggles to put a name to this overwhelming and unfamiliar feeling. A sudden knock abruptly interrupts her thoughts as a maid calls out from the hallway. Quickly recovering her composure, she turns and asks the servant what is going on. Apologizing for the intrusion, the maid informs her that the Viscount and Viscountess are summoning her. Agreeing to the summons, she turns and begins walking down the hallway to answer her parents' call. Opening the heavy doors, she nervously asks her mother and father why they sent for her. Greeting her with a warm smile, her father adjusts his glasses and happily welcomes her into the room. He gestures toward the comfortable sofa, inviting his daughter to take a seat with them. Beaming cheerfully, her mother encourages her to enjoy the freshly prepared tea with plenty of sweet honey. Taking her seat, Cynthia reflects on how she shares the striking red hair and eyes of her loving parents. She notes that many in the Ludren family inherit these vivid crimson features due to a long history of marrying within the lineage. Accepting the teacup with a graceful bow, she feels a deep surge of pride in her noble, crimson heritage. She gazes fondly at her parents, incredibly grateful that they envelop her in warm love without a single displeased expression despite the worry her recent engagement annulment caused them. Thinking of her newfound academic companion, she wistfully hopes that Brooke could experience the warmth of such a kind family. Her attention returns to the table, where delicious-looking sweets and their usual specialty honey sit waiting. Sipping the fragrant brew, she quietly savors the tea flavored with honey from their land, knowing that beekeeping and carbonated hot springs are the territory's main sources of income. Suddenly, she pauses mid-sip as she notices her parents staring at her with highly expectant, knowing smiles. Leaning forward, her father teasingly points out how happy she seems lately and asks if she has a special secret to share. Breaking into a nervous sweat, Cynthia realizes in a panic that they have already figured out about her daily meetings with Brooke. Her mind races as she frantically debates whether she should continue keeping him a secret or finally tell them the truth. Refusing to hide things from the precious family who worried so much about her, she bravely confesses that there is someone she is interested in. Blushing deeply, she explains that she talks to this academy student every day, describing how their time together feels wonderfully joyful yet painfully fleeting. Lowering her gaze shyly, she admits that spending her days like this leaves her wanting nothing more than to be by his side. Finished with her confession, she looks up in confusion when her parents offer absolutely no reaction. She anxiously stares at them in the quiet room, wondering if her sudden romantic revelation was simply too much for them to process. Breaking the silence, her parents exchange a delighted glance and express their profound relief that she has finally found happiness again. Cynthia's eyes widen in sheer shock at their incredibly supportive and understanding response. Smiling tenderly, her father explains how deeply relieved they are that her heart didn't break during the annulment, acknowledging the hidden pain she bravely masked. Looking down at the floor, she remembers how she forced herself to act strong and hide her weakness, believing that the future Viscount couldn't let a broken engagement destroy her. Gripping her dress tightly, she thanks them with a trembling voice, deeply moved by the realization that they were quietly watching over her the entire time. She chides herself for finding it so difficult to show weakness, knowing perfectly well that her parents would have accepted her no matter what happened. Picturing a warm vision of Brooke standing happily alongside her parents, she desperately wishes he could be there to share in this loving moment. Reflecting on her past mindset, she admits she once resolved to enter a loveless marriage purely to secure a capable man who could manage their territory. Smiling softly, she realizes her desires have completely shifted, longing now to build a supportive, loving marriage exactly like the beautiful bond her parents share. Staring with bright determination, she firmly declares her desire for a marriage filled with nothing but true love. She mentally reviews her chosen candidate, noting that he is Sharia Brooke, the third son of the Brooke ducal family. Pondering the Brooke ducal family, she clearly recalls that he had actually sent her a proposal during her very first engagement. She reflects on his dark past, acknowledging the vicious rumors that painted him as a violent delinquent and a lazy brute before he entered the academy. However, she notes that his remarkably diligent lifestyle and ability to maintain top grades after enrolling quickly proved those terrible rumors completely false. Looking up at the academy, she acknowledges just how incredibly difficult it is to reach the top ranks and consistently maintain that position. Realizing what his sheer effort implies, she joyfully concludes that he must be a wonderful person and undeniably the boy who makes her heart flutter. Letting out a soft sigh of relief, she smiles warmly upon realizing that her parents do not seem to have a bad impression of him at all. Gazing toward the future, she feels confident that her family will surely accept Sharia at this promising rate. Despite her optimism, a wave of anxious uncertainty washes over her as she remembers she still hasn't confessed her feelings or discovered how Lord Brooke truly feels about her. Recalling her parents' supportive words, she remembers them expressing their desire to meet him in person and suggesting she invite him to the estate if he agrees. Her mother smiles warmly, sincerely wishing her beloved daughter the best of luck with the invitation. Beaming with profound gratitude, Cynthia happily agrees with her supportive parents. Looking up at the clear sky, she earnestly prays that her bold plan will succeed. Clenching her hands with deep resolve, she swears to give the lonely Sharia the warm, loving family he truly deserves. Smiling with quiet but unbreakable confidence, she realizes that having him by her side will allow her to become an even stronger person.
Though only a few days had passed, the agonizingly long holiday had finally ended for the yearning girl. Brimming with anticipation, Lady Cynthia excitedly realizes she can finally reunite with Sharia. However, dread gnaws at her as she fears coming off as creepy by suddenly inviting him without knowing his true feelings. Having secured her parents' approval to invite him to their estate, the only hurdle left is figuring out how to successfully ask him. Picking up her pace through the halls, her sole desire right now is to see him as soon as possible. Spotting a familiar figure, she instinctively calls out Sharia's name with a hopeful spark. Nervous energy bubbles within her as she urgently wonders what topic she should talk about first. Lurking with a sinister sneer, a boy mutters in dark amusement that she actually came. Halting in her tracks, Cynthia tenses as she struggles to recall the familiar face standing before her. The arrogant boy mocks her, claiming the rumors of her constantly coming behind the school building weren't just tall tales. She quickly identifies the nuisance as Pierre Roy, the entitled son of a count. Reflecting on his sudden, suspicious interest, she notes he only recently began speaking to her. She recognizes him as the third son of the Roy Count family and merely one of the many boys aiming for the position of her fiancé. Maintaining her absolute composure, she firmly requests that if he has something to say, he should please do so another time. Offering a polite but icy greeting, she apologizes to Lord Roy and asserts she has plans to meet a friend now. Refusing to be ignored, Pierre blocks her path and sneers, asking if this friend is the rumored Sharia Brooke. With a condescending smirk, he vehemently warns her to stop associating with a man of such low birth. Leaning in with feigned concern, Pierre insists that this connection will only damage her reputation, Lady Cynthia. Unfazed, Cynthia coldly retorts that being with a man who casually calls a lady by her given name would damage her reputation far more. Dissecting his flaws, she notes that with failing grades putting him at the very bottom alongside Eddie, he possesses zero talent for estate management and would never be a candidate. Despite her utter disdain, she prudently decides she would prefer to settle this peacefully since he is still the son of a count. Eagerly looking forward to speaking with Sharia again today, she formally announces her immediate departure. Defending her true friend's honor, she proudly declares that Brooke is a very sincere, diligent, and wonderful person. Fiercely protective of her schedule, she refuses to let her precious time with Sharia be stolen by something like this. A sudden jolt shocks her as Pierre aggressively moves to stop her escape. Furious at her rejection, Pierre argues that taking in a man neglected by his ducal family will not benefit her house, questioning if she actually plans to make him her fiancé. Puffing up his own worth, he boasts that choosing him would form a close connection with the esteemed Roy Count family. Continuing his arrogant pitch, he brags about his parents doting on him and getting along perfectly with the older brother who will inherit the house. Closing the distance, he menacingly demands that she not be so cold towards him. Keeping her icy glare fixed, she bluntly orders Lord Roy to please clear the way. Dangling his status like bait, he claims the Ludren Viscount family has few chances in high society, suggesting it must be hard to survive without his support as a fiancé. Disgusted by his relentless pushing, she firmly commands him to please stop. Ignoring her clear boundaries, he arrogantly insists that the Roy Count family could protect the Ludren Viscount family. Infuriated by his audacity, she sharply reminds Lord Roy that touching a woman's body without permission is extremely rude. Twisting the knife of high society formality, she demands he exclusively use her family name when addressing her. Stung by her total rejection, Pierre drops his charming facade and aggressively scoffs at her acting all high and mighty. His bruised ego flares as he asks if she is getting the wrong idea just because she is going to become the head of her house as a woman. Spitting venom to crush her pride, he declares that in the end, she is only a Viscount's daughter. With a terrifying lunge, he violently grabs her arm, demanding she listen to what the son of a count has to say as panic flashes across her face. Trapped in his iron grip without the physical space to escape, pure revulsion fills her at the thought of a man like this touching her. Before Pierre can escalate his assault, a powerful hand forcefully intercepts his arm in a sudden blur of motion. A lethal voice pierces the tense air, fiercely demanding to know if Pierre cannot see that Lady Ludren does not like this. Looking up in absolute awe, Cynthia breathes out Sharea's name as her towering savior arrives. Trembling under the sudden overwhelming pressure, a terrified Pierre stammers out, demanding to know what he is doing here. Sharea merely fixes the cowardly noble with a bone-chilling, furious glare that promises instant destruction. Observing her protector closely, Cynthia realizes that Sharea stands out far above his classmates, with an imposing height that perfectly matches his striking face. She notes that his grand stature is usually hard to notice since he always obediently keeps his head lowered. Contrasting the adorable expression he showed her the other day, she shivers realizing his current threatening voice sounded like it was crawling along the ground. She firmly believes that if he properly groomed himself and straightened his posture, he could become a noble young man so gallant that he would lose to no one. Her heart swells with deep admiration as this extraordinary boy actively tries to protect her from harm. Lady Cynthia realizes how incredibly strong and dependable her savior truly is. Startled by his sudden proximity, Cynthia stares up as Sharea urgently asks if she is all right. With a radiant smile, she earnestly thanks Lord Brooke, assuring him she is perfectly fine thanks to his timely rescue. Frustration contorts Pierre's face as he glares venomously at the towering boy interrupting his plans. Scoffing at the display, Pierre mockingly asks if the low-born noble is pretending to be some grand hero from a stage play. With a condescending sneer, the arrogant count's son demands to know why a shameless boy like him doesn't just transfer to the commoner class. Striking a cruel nerve, Pierre nastily notes that even commoners rarely have children who are utterly neglected by their own parents. He maliciously asks if Sharea truly believed he could play the protagonist in this story. Taunting the silent giant, Pierre questions if his sudden burst of courage has already dried up. A sharp voice cuts through the tension as Cynthia bluntly declares that Pierre himself is the pathetic side character. Utterly unamused, she commands him to act like the boring side character he is and stay quiet in the corner. Furious disbelief flashes across the bully's face as her cutting words completely shatter his fragile ego. Stepping protectively beside her towering friend, she fiercely warns Pierre that she will not allow him to hurl another insult at Lord Brooke. Flipping the script, she aggressively challenges Lord Roy to name a single thing in which he actually surpasses Lord Brooke. She fiercely highlights Sharea's overwhelming talent, knowledge, and ability as traits worthy of the center stage. Desperate to defend his shattered pride, Pierre furiously shouts that he is obviously the better man. Instantly shutting him down, Cynthia points out that without even thinking about it, Lord Brooke is vastly superior in academics. Gesturing to their distinct statures, she logically deduces that the clear difference in physique means Sharea also completely surpasses him in strength. Flushing slightly, she mentally scolds herself as her deep infatuation nearly slips out during her aggressive defense. She inwardly swoons over Sharea's higher family rank, far more gentlemanly character, and the incredibly intelligent, handsome face hidden beneath his bangs. Grasping at straws, a panicked Pierre pathetically screams that Sharea is just an unloved child. He desperately clings to his only perceived advantage, gloating that unlike him, he is deeply loved by his own family. A deadly, silent shadow falls over Cynthia's expression as those cruel words cross the ultimate line. Taking a decisive step forward, she confidently embraces the idea that if a lack of familial love is Lord Brooke's only weakness, it hardly matters. Utter confusion washes over the arrogant noble boy as her fierce determination completely derails his argument. Unfazed and glowing with radiant resolve, she prepares to deliver her ultimate decree. With unshakable conviction, she boldly declares that she will simply give him all the love he needs. She vows to quench his parched heart, promising to make her affection overflow if it isn't enough as Sharea watches in stunned silence. Beaming directly at her towering companion, she warmly assures Lord Sharea Brooke that he is completely perfect just the way he is. Flailing in a pathetic rage, Pierre spitefully brands her a damaged noble lady with terrible taste, screaming that trash suits trash. He viciously claims that if she weren't set to inherit a title, he would never choose such an unpleasant, unfeminine woman. Suddenly, a terrifying chill paralyzes Pierre as a massive shadow eclipses his vision. A deep, lethal voice rumbles through the air, questioning why trash like him dares to speak ill of her. Looming like a demon, Sharea coldly orders the trembling boy to keep his mouth shut if he cannot comprehend her immense worth. Cynthia watches in breathless awe as her gentle giant unleashes an aura of murderous intensity on a completely different level. She thrills at the realization that he perfectly embodies the terrifying, villainous Yandra noble's son from the main route. Leaning in close to the terrified bully, Shareya promises absolute ruin if he dares to insult her any further. Shrinking back in sheer terror, Pierre weakly stammers out a challenge, asking what this neglected son could possibly do to him. Shareya ruthlessly points out that a boy who grew up loved has far too many precious things to lose compared to someone who can throw everything away. Stepping aggressively into Pierre's space, the looming threat completely shatters the pampered noble's bravado. With a pitch-black, demonic smile, Shareya whispers that it would be incredibly easy to drag him into the dark sea and sink together. Pure, unadulterated fear violently dilates Pierre's eyes as the horrifying reality of his mistake sets in. Screaming in absolute panic, the disgraced Count's son turns and flees for his life down the corridor. Blinking at the dust trail, Cynthia dryly remarks that his cowardly escape was a textbook example of running away. The terrifying monster instantly vanishes as Shareya turns back to her, gently calling out Lady Ludren's name. Still buzzing with adrenaline, she firmly concludes that only the Crown Prince himself could possibly stand against that sheer level of intensity. His expression softening into gentle concern, he warmly reassures her that there is absolutely no need to care about the bully's cruel words. Pushing the unpleasantness aside, he earnestly thanks her for fiercely defending him against the noble's mockery. Offering him a bright, reassuring wink, she playfully insists that it is perfectly all right. Gazing deeply into his eyes, she desperately hopes their true feelings can finally reach each other just like their intertwining gazes. Beaming with undeniable affection, Lady Cynthia warmly declares that his profound feelings make her incredibly happy. A fleeting shadow of hesitation suddenly crosses her delicate features as she softly adds a lingering, "but," to her confession. Blinking in sheer confusion, Shareya listens as she fiercely orders him to never throw his precious life away. Locking her determined gaze onto his, she vehemently commands him to live. Desperation threading her voice, she begs him not to carelessly discard his beautiful life and to remain steadfastly by her side. Pulling him into a sudden, tight embrace, she whispers for him to simply wish for it if he truly desires her presence. Stepping back with a flustered spark, she mentally questions if it was really all right that he completely misunderstood the romantic weight of her relationship-defining declaration. Voicing his deep insecurities, the towering boy worries that this is a crucial period for her to find a fiancé, fearing what vicious rumors Lord Roy might maliciously spread around. Gently placing a comforting hand on her arm, he nervously stammers that he would feel absolutely terrible if his lowly presence became a heavy burden to her. Smiling through the lingering sting of his denseness, she silently thanks him while accepting that he mistook her heartfelt vow as pure platonic loyalty. Panic grips her heart as she realizes that pushing the truth now might make him pull away forever, convincing herself she could never recover from such a devastating rejection. Masking her true desires behind a bright, reassuring smile, she politely requests that he simply continue treating her the same as he always has. Desperately trying to soothe his anxiety, she urges him not to view himself so poorly since they are, after all, very close friends. Returning her brilliant smile with his own breathtaking expression, he happily agrees to ask the exact same unwavering friendship of her. His soft, earnest voice openly admits that her comforting request applies to his own deep feelings just as strongly. Standing together in the sunlit corridor, he sincerely confesses that the precious time he spends talking with Lady Ludren feels utterly irreplaceable. Leaning in with an ecstatic blush, she excitedly reveals that the holiday felt agonizingly lonely without him, making her eagerly await the Academy's reopening. Caught completely off guard by her sweet honesty, his eyes widen slightly as he mutters that he experienced the exact same longing. Breaking his usual timid silence, he boldly admits the holiday dragged on endlessly because his only thought was desperately wanting to see her again soon. Breathless from the sudden romantic tension, Cynthia stares up at the handsome giant and softly whispers Lord Brooke's name. Radiating pure joy, she happily celebrates the beautiful reality that their yearning hearts felt the exact same way during the long break. Seizing the perfect emotional momentum, she confidently leaps forward and formally asks if he would like to visit her home on the next holiday. Struck dumb by the incredibly sudden invitation, Shareya freezes in absolute shock at the impeccable timing of her request. Maintaining her unwavering gaze, she firmly insists on officially introducing him to her parents as her treasured, close friend. Doubt instantly clouds his expression as he argues that her parents will surely scold her if she brings a man with his terrible, neglected reputation into their prestigious estate. Shrinking back into his old, insecure posture, he quietly questions how he could possibly face her esteemed parents. Shattering his grim expectations, Cynthia energetically shouts a triumphant confirmation to cut through his rising panic. Beaming with undeniable pride, she proudly informs the startled boy that she already secured absolute permission to grow close to Lord Brooke. Delivering the final, undeniable proof of his acceptance, she reveals that the Ludren Viscount and his wife explicitly stated they want to meet him. Emphasizing her family's welcoming nature, she lovingly reiterates that they actively requested this meeting despite knowing every rumor about his past. A heavy bead of nervous sweat drips down his face as his trembling eyes process the terrifying reality of meeting a noble family. Spiraling into a frantic internal calculation, he desperately wonders if staying up all night every single day will give him enough time to perfectly prepare for the weekend. Noticing his sudden, intense distraction, she curiously calls out to Lord Brooke, prompting him to hastily dismiss his wild thoughts as nothing. Banishing all remaining doubts with a fierce, determined gaze, he forcefully declares that he will definitely go. Overjoyed by his brave acceptance, she expresses her deep gladness while he quietly admits this is the very first time he has ever been invited to a friend's home. Radiating pure excitement, she brightly proposes that they enjoy the highly anticipated weekend together to the absolute fullest. Flashing a soft, breathtakingly handsome smile, he whispers his heartfelt agreement as the thrilling chapter draws to a close. Cynthia's vibrant, smiling face perfectly mirrors the sheer joy of knowing he will definitely come to her estate. The monumental weight of his upcoming visit completely consumes his focused mind as he prepares himself for the grand event. A fierce, protective intensity briefly flashes across his sharp eyes as he steels his resolve for the challenges ahead. Energized by the golden promise waiting for them at the weekend, their daily schoolyard meetings transform into incredibly lively, joyous encounters. Overflowing with grand plans, she eagerly lists wanting to introduce him to her beloved horse, exchange favorite books, and show off a strange travel ornament. Laughing at her own boundless enthusiasm, she playfully doubts that a single day will provide nearly enough time for everything she wants to do. The two friends share a warm, bubbling giggle, utterly unable to stop talking about their exciting weekend plans. Matching her radiant energy with a striking, confident grin, he smoothly agrees and admits he is really looking forward to it too. The agonizingly slow week finally melts away, bringing the joyous reality that tomorrow is the fateful day she invites Sharia to her beloved home. Unable to contain her forward-thinking excitement, she casually suggests they should go ahead and make concrete plans for their next outing while they are at it. Chuckling at her relentless pace, he gently teases the Lady Viscountess, asking if she doesn't think planning the second date is getting a little ahead of themselves. Their synchronized footsteps echo cheerfully down the Academy's grand stone staircase as they walk side by side in perfect harmony. Lurking in the shadows, a malicious group of girls spots them and sneers that a truly shameless girl and a dull man are getting along disgustingly well. Lurking on the grand staircase, a malicious group of gossiping girls sneers at the passing duo and aggressively mocks their shameless companionship. Casting a brief, sideways glance, Cynthia quickly identifies the nuisance as the same group of young ladies who constantly hovered around her ex-fiancé, Eddie. A tired sigh escapes her as she inwardly complains about their relentless harassment, noting that it has already been quite some time since she decisively broke off her engagement. Resigned to the endless high society drama, she laments that politely asking them to stop would likely just invite more trouble instead of buying them peace. Spitting pure venom, the lead girl cruelly jeers that the discarded Viscountess is desperately clinging to a dull man because Lord Eddie abandoned her. A dangerous shadow instantly falls over Cynthia's expression as the insulting word, dull, violently strikes a nerve. Pressing their perceived advantage, the bullies condescendingly question her terrible taste in choosing such an incredibly lackluster partner. Brushing off the baseless provocation, she pragmatically decides that explaining how she was the one who actually discarded Eddie to people with zero discernment would be a total waste of breath. Refusing to let it go, the gossips eagerly escalate their cruel whispers, branding her an unsightly, brazen woman who has completely lost all sense of shame. Fiercely prioritizing her own happiness, she firmly resolves to completely ignore them because she cannot waste a single precious second of her time with Sharia. To her rising alarm, she suddenly notices Sharia radiating a terrifying, dark aura as he prepares to unleash his fury on the bullies. Snapping into action, she urgently calls out Lord Brooke's name to intercept his rising wrath. His chilling, protective gaze sharply locks onto her, revealing an overwhelming readiness to brutally crush anyone who dares to insult her. Thinking quickly, she gently reasons with him that unlike their clash with Pierre, arguing down a group of noble ladies over baseless rumors puts them at a massive social disadvantage. Protective panic grips her heart as she realizes she must avoid a public confrontation at all costs to prevent disgraceful rumors from ruining his already fragile reputation. Flashing a brilliant, reassuring smile, she smoothly diffuses his anger by suggesting they simply ignore the rude pests and focus purely on enjoying their time together. His murderous intensity completely melts away as he softly asks if she is truly all right with letting the vicious insults slide. Watching their intended targets casually walk away, the mean girls seethe with furious indignation at being utterly dismissed. Shrill voices echo through the courtyard as the bullies aggressively demand to know if the impudent couple is actually daring to ignore them. Turning her back on the noise, Cynthia happily looks up at her towering companion and casually suggests they prepare for class together. Offering him a radiant, untroubled smile, she smoothly pivots the conversation and asks if Lord Brooke would like to accompany her to the library. Matching her graceful retreat, his striking features soften into a warm grin as he flawlessly agrees to her delightful proposal. Triumph fills her heart as she notes that the quiet sanctuary of the library is the absolute perfect place to escape the loud girls and spend peaceful time with Sharia. Suddenly, a panicked scream violently shatters the peace as a massive, protective arm furiously blocks her path. A brutal wave of freezing water violently erupts across the corridor as she screams Lord Brooke's name in sheer horror. Taking the devastating hit meant for her, the gentle giant stands completely drenched as the cruel trap successfully springs. Cackling with malicious glee, the bullies emerge from the shadows and spitefully declare what a horrible thing it is to do. Frantically reaching for her handkerchief, Cynthia curses its small size but desperately moves in to wipe the freezing water from his face. Tenderly wiping his cheek, she profusely apologizes that he had to protect her, while he gently smiles and simply expresses his deep relief that she is safe. Basking in their petty victory, the ringleader cruelly gloats that she just ended up washing that filthy, dull man for her. Shivering at the chill in the air, panic tightens Cynthia's chest as she realizes his heavy clothes are completely soaked and he will freeze at this rate. Blind to their impending doom, the girls continue to mock him, foolishly asserting that he will never become as splendid as their precious Lord Eddie. Shattering their arrogance, a lethal, freezing voice echoes through the hall as Sharia slowly turns to face his attackers. Slicking back his dripping hair to reveal his breathtaking features, he coldly asks if they do not feel utterly ashamed of their unbefitting behavior. A sudden, electric shock rips through the bullies as their eyes widen in absolute, blushing disbelief at the magnificent sight before them. Watching the girls instantly swoon, Cynthia realizes they were so blinded by their obsession with Eddie that they completely missed Sharia's overwhelming beauty. Flushing a deep, vibrant red, the noble ladies stammer in sheer awe, completely stunned that the rumored dullard is actually a breathtakingly beautiful gentleman. Instantly changing their tune, the captivated girls squeal his name, internally screaming that his stunning looks completely outshine Lord Eddie. A surge of intense pride swells within Cynthia as she internally boasts that his supreme beauty easily rivals even the crown prince of the main rout. Utterly repulsed by their swooning praise, Sharia glares down with bone-chilling disgust and harshly commands them not to speak his name. Dripping with dark, intimidating fury, he issues a terrifying warning that they better carve into their memories. Fixing the terrified girls with a demonic stare, he vows to show absolutely no mercy, even to women, if they ever dare to harm Lady Ludrin again. Bizarrely thrilled by his terrifying threat, the hopeless fangirls clutch their chests and squeal that his dangerous, scary side is wonderfully attractive too. Refusing to let him endure the cold a second longer, a deeply concerned Cynthia aggressively grabs his arm and orders an immediate retreat to the infirmary. Marching him briskly up the stone steps, she urgently warns him that he will catch a terrible cold if they do not hurry. Her mind racing with care plans, she swiftly calculates sending his wet uniform to her estate while expressing immense gratitude that tomorrow is a day off. A deep crimson blush violently colors his handsome face as he hesitantly calls out Lady Ludrin's name from a few steps behind. Halting her determined march, she turns back with genuine concern and softly asks if something is wrong. Averting his gaze in extreme embarrassment, he nervously points out that people might completely misunderstand the fact that they are tightly holding hands. Gently reassuring her protective knight, she notes that he is the one who would normally dislike such contact, to which he quietly admits that he doesn't find it unpleasant at all. Flustered by the sudden physical contact, Cynthia hastily withdraws her hand and stammers a frantic apology, fearing she must have made him incredibly uncomfortable. A brief moment of profound silence stretches between them as his captivating eyes fixate deeply upon her. Shattering her anxious assumptions, Sharia gently confesses that he does not dislike holding hands with her either. Flashing a breathtaking, radiant smile that completely transforms his demeanor, he smoothly offers his hand and asks to escort her. Blushing fiercely beneath his bangs, the towering boy silently rejoices, noting that her touch feels much warmer than before. Walking hand in hand through the sunlit public corridor, Cynthia's heart soars as she wonders if she can truly hope for a shared future with him again. Their peaceful moment is abruptly interrupted as the infirmary door swings open, revealing a surprised man who politely excuses himself. Startled by the sight of the completely drenched giant and his fiercely blushing companion, the academy physician quickly asks what in the world happened. Observing the dripping water with a warm, knowing smile, the handsome doctor casually wonders aloud if the towering student caught a cold. Hiding her intense embarrassment, Cynthia mentally notes she might have a slight fever right now before awkwardly explaining that some trouble occurred and he desperately needs to change clothes. Urgently seeking a solution, she asks the 35-year-old physician if he possesses any spare clothes large enough to actually fit Lord Brooke's massive frame. She confidently reassures herself that it will be perfectly all right, admiring the doctor's remarkably youthful, handsome face and his glossy long hair tied in a neat ponytail. Dr. George Hadley, who is secretly another capture target from the game, smoothly confirms that he fortunately has larger sizes prepared in the infirmary. Taking charge of the situation, the elegant physician smiles and leads the shivering, completely soaked student behind the partition to change. Relaxing slightly, Cynthia firmly believes she can safely trust the kind and caring Marquis's son, even though high society cruelly scorns him as an illegitimate child. While wiping the freezing water from his face, George quietly presses the towering boy, asking why he allowed himself to get completely drenched. Averting his gaze to protect his lady's honor, Sharia dismissively mutters that it was nothing important at all. Listening closely through the curtain, Cynthia's heart aches as she realizes Sharia has absolutely no intention of revealing he took the cruel hit to protect her. She frustratingly understands his silent sacrifice, knowing that even if they made a massive fuss over the truth, Duke Brooke would never lift a finger to defend his neglected son. Sensing the hidden weight behind the boy's evasive answer, George offers a sharp, knowing smile and smoothly accepts the lie. Wrapping a thick towel around the shivering giant, the doctor warmly invites him to come and discuss his troubles anytime he needs. Lifting the boy's chin with a critical eye, George notes his unsteady footing and slightly bloodshot eyes, sharply asking if he is feeling unwell. Narrowing his gaze with profound medical concern, the observant physician directly asks if the towering student is perhaps suffering from severe sleep deprivation. Cynthia instantly remembers that the doctor's sharp observation powers and deeply caring nature made him a wildly popular character who always noticed the heroine's slightest illness. Pacing nervously on the tiled floor, guilt gnaws at her as she realizes she completely failed to notice his exhaustion and wonders if he was secretly pushing himself. Shock paralyzes her features as the horrifying reality of Sharia being severely sleep-deprived finally crashes down upon her. Pressing for the hidden truth, George gently urges the exhausted boy to please explain the real reason behind his suffering. Maintaining his professional but caring demeanor, the physician firmly asks if it is indeed true that he has not been sleeping enough lately. Trembling with rising protective fury, Cynthia tightly clenches her fists and whispers Lord Brooke's name in sheer desperation. Fearing the absolute worst, she frantically wonders if the horrific abuse at his home is keeping him awake, fiercely vowing to help him no matter what. Shattering her dark assumptions, Sharia shyly confesses that he pushed himself to help with his father's work so he could safely enjoy his upcoming weekend visit to her estate. Smiling with immense relief from behind the curtain, the physician warmly advises him not to worry anymore. Delivering a strict medical verdict, George warns that combining severe sleep deprivation with freezing clothes makes him a prime target for illness. Taking complete control of his patient's well-being, the doctor firmly orders the exhausted boy to sleep in the infirmary for a while to recover. Yielding to the sensible advice, a deeply grateful Sharia softly smiles and thanks the physician for his immense kindness. Covering her mouth in absolute shock, Cynthia realizes with a heavy heart that he lost precious sleep solely because he was so determined to keep his weekend promise with her. Hearing the rustle of sheets as the giant settles into bed, she listens as he obediently agrees to follow the doctor's resting orders. As George dramatically pulls back the partition curtain, an incredibly flustered Cynthia stammers, desperately wanting to go inside and see him. Stopping her in her tracks, the sharp-eyed physician suddenly drops a bombshell question, bluntly asking if she is actually his fiancée. Noting that the exhausted boy fell asleep the very moment he lay down, George gently suggests they leave him in peace. Cutting through her defensive panic, the doctor firmly states that while he understands her deep worry, she simply cannot disturb his crucial rest right now. Staring at the drawn curtain, she marvels at his overwhelming dedication, deeply moved that he looked forward to visiting her home so much that he tried to keep his promise no matter what. Crushing guilt washes over her as she curses her own pathetic blindness, swearing she never intended to make him sacrifice his health like this just for her. Standing silently in the quiet infirmary, the observant physician watches as profound emotions silently shift across the young lady's determined face. A beautiful, radiant warmth blooms entirely within her chest, bursting with the joyous realization that his powerful, unspoken feelings have finally reached her. Gazing tenderly at the sleeping giant's peaceful face, she silently vows that she fiercely wants to protect him too, Sharia. Closing her eyes with unwavering resolve, she warmly imagines a brilliant future where he stands steadfastly by her side, knowing it would bring her infinite happiness. Brimming with absolute certainty, her heart fully accepts the overwhelming truth as she silently confesses her deep, unshakable love for him. A soft, exhausted groan escapes his lips as he rests, seamlessly drawing this intensely emotional chapter to a compelling close. With a highly anticipated weekend rapidly approaching, the thrilling promise that he will be arriving soon hangs vibrantly in the air. Lady Cynthia's maid asks if she has finished getting ready for the highly anticipated arrival of her guest. Answering the call, Cynthia quickly finishes up and steps out as a grand carriage pulls up to her estate. Stepping out of the carriage, Sharia is warmly welcomed as his foot lands on the steps of the grand Ludren estate. Beaming with joy, Lady Cynthia greets Lord Brooke as he politely thanks her for the invitation. Cynthia mentally swoons, completely captivated by how wonderfully handsome he looks in his rare casual clothes. She expresses profound relief that his rest in the infirmary worked, admitting she was incredibly worried about him yesterday. Blushing slightly, she compliments him by noting that he gives off a refreshingly different impression compared to his usual uniform. Staring deeply into her eyes, Sharia breathtakingly declares that she looks exceptionally beautiful today. Caught off guard by his own sudden boldness, a flustered Sharia averts his gaze and timidly stammers. Cynthia bashfully admits she put extra effort into dressing up just for him, drawing sweet gratitude from her towering guest. Both teenagers blush furiously, internally screaming over the intensely romantic and embarrassing atmosphere enveloping them. Breaking the spell, Cynthia cheerfully guides him toward the back garden where her parents eagerly await. Walking through the lush grounds, Sharia marvels at the breathtaking beauty of the Ludren family's prized garden. A warm, mature voice suddenly calls out, expressing deep gratitude for his long-awaited visit. Standing elegantly in the gazebo, Cynthia's parents greet the young noble with welcoming smiles. The Ludren Viscount acknowledges the towering boy's brave sacrifice, revealing he knows about the cruel water incident. Snapping into a perfect bow, Sharia Brooke formally introduces himself and politely thanks the noble couple for having him. Bowing deeply in return, Cynthia's parents sincerely thank the shocked boy for fiercely protecting their precious daughter. Flustered by their intense gratitude, Sharia hurriedly urges them to raise their heads, insisting that protecting her is only natural. Flashing a breathtakingly tender smile, he confidently declares that Lady Ludren is his deeply cherished friend. Charmed by his sincerity, the Viscount and his wife warmly invite him to sit and chat over a freshly prepared cup of tea. Cynthia watches in absolute relief, incredibly happy that her entire family accepts Sharia without a shred of prejudice. The peaceful tea time shifts as the estate staff proudly brings out the family's prized animals. Gazing at her gentle giant, Cynthia fiercely prays that this warm afternoon brings true peace to his long-neglected heart. Leaping up with boundless excitement, Cynthia thanks the staff while a confused Sharia watches her bolt forward. Beaming with immense pride, she officially introduces her towering friend to her two magnificent, beloved horses. She happily points out the stunning contrast, introducing the majestic black horse as Noah and the elegant white horse as Ali. Admiring the well-groomed animals, Sharia softly notes that he can clearly see how deeply she cherishes them. Puffing out her chest, Cynthia proudly confirms her deep love for the magnificent beasts. His eyes sparking with quiet curiosity, Sharia asks permission to touch them, to which she instantly and enthusiastically agrees. Encouraging him forward, she explains that the friendly horses absolutely love getting their faces and necks warmly stroked. Startled as the massive black horse affectionately nudges him, Sharia freezes while Cynthia giggles that Noah already likes him. Gently petting the beast, Sharia whispers a sweet greeting to Noah, completely fascinated by the unexpected softness of the horse's muzzle. Smiling softly at his rare display of joy, she correctly guesses that this is his very first time ever touching a horse. The Viscount steps out from the shadows, warmly asking the towering boy if he has made friends with the black steed. A dark realization hits Cynthia as she notes that while riding is a fundamental noble skill, his abusive family likely never bothered to teach him. Staring at her father, Cynthia nervously anticipates what the perceptive Viscount might say next. Offering a kind smile, her father smoothly invites Sharia to ride with him along the garden's spacious outer path. Lowering his gaze in shame, the towering boy painfully admits that he has never ridden a horse in his life. A heavy silence falls as Sharia confesses his humiliating lack of education, completely exposing his family's utter neglect. The Viscount internalizes the grim reality that a duke's son reaching this age without riding training is normally impossible, confirming the horrific rumors of his abuse. Instantly shifting gears to protect the boy's pride, the Viscount brightly offers to personally teach him how to ride right now. Sharia's eyes widen with hopeful shock as he asks for permission, receiving an immediate, reassuring confirmation from the older man. Watching the beautiful exchange, Cynthia's heart swells with deep gratitude as she realizes her father perfectly understood Sharia's painful circumstances. Eager to learn, Sharia enthusiastically agrees as the Viscount patiently begins the lesson with the basic tack and leading techniques. Sipping tea from the pavilion, Cynthia and her mother happily watch the two men bond, noting they look exactly like a real father and son. Smiling warmly at the peaceful scene, the Viscountess softly praises Sharia as a truly good boy. Cynthia locks eyes with her mother, her expression brimming with absolute, unshakable resolve. Delivering her ultimate declaration, Cynthia boldly asks her mother for permission to fully claim Sharia as her own. Returning her daughter's fierce gaze with pure maternal love, the Viscountess gently promises that they only wish for her absolute happiness. Smiling warmly, the elegant Viscountess gently encourages her determined daughter to do her absolute best. Flushing slightly under her mother's knowing gaze, Lady Cynthia quietly steels her resolve for the crucial moments ahead. Clenching her fists with unwavering determination, she inwardly declares that all that is left is for her to do her absolute best. Watching the towering boy ride past, Cynthia marvels at how incredibly amazing Sharia is to learn horseback riding so properly in such a short time. Standing beside the resting white horse alley, the Viscount warmly teases his daughter that it took her quite a while to make a horse run because she was more temperamental than the beast. Flustered by her father's accurate teasing, she watches in awe as the Viscount proudly concludes that Lord Brooke must possess a natural talent for riding. Startling her mother with sudden, overwhelming enthusiasm, Cynthia enthusiastically announces that she will go change into her riding clothes immediately. Returning in her sleek equestrian attire, she urgently calls out Lord Brooke's name to catch his attention. Stepping forward with a radiant smile, she formally requests that he please let her join him for the ride. Atop the grand black horse, Sharia brightly compliments how wonderful she looks, prompting Cynthia to happily return the praise by declaring he looks absolutely splendid. Gently patting the snorting horse with pure affection, Sharia graciously thanks his host as the Viscount proudly notes that the boy is truly worth teaching. Stunned by his rapid progress, Cynthia gasps that he is already cantering, while her father laughs and admits his sheer surprise at how quickly the boy learns. Approaching the pristine white horse, she joyfully calls out Allie's name as the elegant creature perks up in delighted recognition. Tenderly stroking the beautiful mare's mane, she gently murmurs that she is counting on her beloved companion today too. Taking charge of the lesson's next phase, the Viscount smoothly suggests the two youths go together, noting that riding as far as the nearby lake should make for excellent practice. Beaming with eager anticipation, Cynthia cheerfully agrees with her father as she and Sharia begin their ride side by side. The majestic horses carry them steadily away from the estate, venturing deeply into the breathtaking, mountainous landscape. Riding peacefully through the sun-dappled forest path, the young nobles enjoy a serene, profoundly quiet moment together amidst the shimmering greenery. Arriving at the sparkling, tranquil lake, Cynthia softly asks if they should let their magnificent steeds rest around here, receiving his immediate agreement. Gazing at him in profound admiration, she proudly declares it amazing that he can ride this well after only a little instruction, proving his incredible talent extends far beyond academics. A soft, genuine smile graces his handsome face as he admits he is truly happy, confessing he never thought he would ever get to experience horseback riding. Gathering her immense courage, Cynthia realizes this is difficult to ask but firmly resolves that she absolutely must ask it properly right here. Listening to him humbly attribute his success to the black horse adjusting to him, she prepares to pierce through his modest deflections. Locking her determined gaze onto his, she softly calls out Lord Brooke's name and directly asks if life in the ducal house is incredibly painful for him. Lowering his eyes in quiet sorrow, he admits he used to bitterly envy his brothers when their father taught them to ride, constantly wondering why he was the only one denied such things. Offering a heartbreakingly sad smile, the gentle giant softly whispers that yes, he supposes his life there truly is painful. Seeking to reassure her, he quickly adds that it does not hurt as much as it did when he was young, explaining that he simply became incredibly good at giving up. Revealing the true depth of his tragic isolation, he confesses that after experiencing that frustrating, lonely pain over and over, abandoning his hopes became his only defense. Horror grips Cynthia's heart as she realizes he has only survived by desperately giving up, terrified that if he continues pretending not to know how deeply he is wounded, he will someday completely break. Fearing she might carelessly hurt him, she frantically worries that speaking her true mind right now would be an incredibly irresponsible thing to say. Unable to contain her surging emotions any longer, she fiercely blurts out that she absolutely does not want him to give up. Staring at her with profound, gentle affection, he softly praises the Ludren family, warmly noting that both the Viscount, the Viscountess, and she herself are incredibly kind. A flush of deep pride warms her cheeks as she thanks him, firmly declaring that her loving parents are her absolute pride and joy. His expression softening into pure gratitude, he earnestly admits he is so glad he was able to see with his own eyes that such a beautiful, happy family truly exists. Refusing to let the conversation end there, she frantically thinks that he might blame her for speaking carelessly, but she absolutely cannot let him just praise her and walk away. Stepping boldly into his space, she completely shatters the distance between them and fiercely declares that she wants him to become a member of her family too. Absolute shock violently ripples across his strikingly handsome features as the monumental weight of her sudden words crashes into his mind. Pouring her entire soul into her confession, she vehemently vows that she wants to protect him, give him true happiness, and ensure he never has to give up anything ever again. Flashing a brilliant, utterly devoted smile, she brightly declares her ultimate desire to build a wonderfully loving home together with him. Trembling slightly as the wind rustles the forest leaves, a completely stunned Sharia stammers out, asking his lady if that truly means what he thinks it means. Unwavering in her absolute conviction, she stares directly into his wide eyes and beautifully demands that he please marry her. Paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of her proposal, the towering noble stands frozen under the expansive, cloud-swept sky. Panic instantly overtakes his logic as he desperately argues that taking an illegitimate child as a fiancé will practically offer no benefit and heavily damage the Ludren Viscount family's precious reputation. Trying to push her away to protect her, he urgently pleads with Lady Cynthia, insisting that even without choosing someone like him, she has far better options. Covering his blushing face in agonizing shame, he stammers that someone like him is not worthy, but she fiercely cuts him off, aggressively declaring that what she wants to know is his true heart. Desperately clinging to his self-hatred, he loudly insists she should marry a wonderful man and become truly happy. Shattering his pathetic excuses with an intense, unwavering glare, she steps even closer and aggressively demands that she wants to hear his actual heart. Tears finally break through his tragic facade as his true, desperate desire violently spills out, choking on a sob as he confesses he truly wants to be with her. Throwing her arms around his towering frame in a fiercely protective embrace, she lovingly whispers that she desperately wants them to become a real family. Holding her weeping giant tightly against her chest, she beautifully promises to build one incredibly happy family where she will absolutely never let him feel lonely again. Tears of pure joy well up in Lady Cynthia's eyes as she fiercely promises that she absolutely will make him happy. Wrapping her arms tighter around his trembling frame, she tenderly whispers that she desperately wants to spend forever with him. Her heart overflowing with pure affection, she beautifully vows that she wants them to become a real, unbreakable family. Gazing down at her with overwhelming devotion, Shahraya softly agrees and brilliantly suggests they become a wonderfully happy family. A profound, sunlit silence perfectly surrounds the newly united couple as they hold each other close by the tranquil lake. Suddenly pulling back with a vibrant red blush, the towering boy hastily apologizes for acting so completely improperly. Flustered by his own sudden boldness, he frantically apologizes for touching her when they are not even officially engaged yet. Giggling at his utterly adorable panic, she playfully reminds him that she was actually the one who aggressively hugged him first. Watching his breathtakingly shy reaction, she internally wonders just how deeply this incredible boy intends to make her fall for him. She mentally swoons over his mature, beautiful face and his incredibly splendid physique, marveling at what an utterly adorable person he truly is. Sitting peacefully side by the sparkling water, she realizes this is their very first time relaxing like this since he always considerately stood back at the academy. A deep sense of relief washes over her as she happily reflects that their true, passionate feelings have finally reached each other. Basking in the golden afternoon glow, they slowly stand up and cheerfully prepare to head back to the estate together. Looking at her anxious companion, Cynthia questions if his parents will oppose their sudden engagement. Catching his solemn reaction, Shahraya quietly observes that her parents might be the ones to object. Beaming with pride, Cynthia happily declares that her parents fully support her feelings for the Duke of Brooke's son. Leaning in playfully, the young noblewoman asks if she can begin calling him Lord Shahraya. Flashing a gentle smile, Shahraya graciously agrees and offers to call her Lady Cynthia in return. Chuckling softly at the formality, she warmly insists that he drop the title and just call her Cynthia. Accepting the newfound intimacy, he asks her to use his first name as well. Gazing affectionately at his partner, Shahraya earnestly declares how much he looks forward to their shared future. Echoing his heartfelt sentiment, Cynthia eagerly anticipates standing by his side for many years to come. Basking in the tranquil atmosphere, the newly formed couple shares a quiet moment of pure romantic bliss. Breaking the comfortable silence, Cynthia thoughtfully asks if her companion enjoyed the snacks they shared. Turning his attention to the journey ahead, Shahraya gently suggests it is time for them to head back. Petting his dark steed with affection, he relies on the trusty horse Noah to guide them safely home. Reflecting on their fateful journey, Shahraya marvels at how they initially traveled down this path as mere friends. Riding side by side through the sunlit woods, he joyfully acknowledges that they are now returning as lovers. Stealing a quick glance at one another, their eyes unexpectedly lock in a sudden burst of tension. Startled by the intense spark between them, the two violently flinch as overwhelming embarrassment takes over. Processing the fiery connection, Shahraya internally marvels at the profound mutual desire burning fiercely between them. Approaching the grand estate, the couple officially announces their safe return to the towering mansion. Greeted warmly at the mansion doors, the young lovers receive a cheerful welcome after their eventful ride. Sitting formally before Cynthia's parents, an anxious Shahraya prepares to deliver their life-changing report. Overflowing with joy, Cynthia's father immediately suggests formally proposing the engagement to the Duke's family. Smiling brightly beside her blushing fiancé, Cynthia graciously thanks her parents for their enthusiastic blessing. Listens as the noble parents meticulously outline the elaborate preparations required for a proper, aristocratic engagement. The Viscountess excitedly mentions that while the second celebration may just be a modest gathering with relatives, they must dress up and thoroughly enjoy it. Leaning forward with a serious but warm expression, the Viscount adds that they absolutely must also think about hosting an official engagement announcement party. A dark shadow of shame abruptly crosses Shahraya's handsome face as he lowers his gaze in deep, agonizing hesitation. Clenching his fists tightly in his lap, the neglected Duke's son painfully admits that he has never been allotted any allowance or budget by his cruel family. His voice trembling with humiliation, he softly confesses that he finds it incredibly difficult to prepare a proper dress for Cynthia for the grand party. Aching with extreme embarrassment, he deeply apologizes for constantly showing such pitiful, inadequate sides of himself to his wonderful new family. Shattering his dark insecurities instantly, Cynthia beams a radiant smile and fiercely assures Shahraya that it is perfectly all right. Leaning in with boundless excitement, she happily begs him to please allow her to prepare their gorgeous matching outfits instead. Overflowing with pure enthusiasm, she enthusiastically confesses that she is already incredibly excited to dress him up in splendid clothes. Gently comforting his bruised pride, she warmly reasons that since they are the ones officially taking him as a son-in-law, paying for the outfits is perfectly fine. Tears of profound gratitude rapidly well up in his eyes as he softly breathes out her name and thanks her from the absolute bottom of his heart. Smiling at his daughter's unwavering devotion, the Viscount smoothly agrees that they can easily handle the outfits, but sharply asks about the dancing. Freezing in sheer, unadulterated panic, a completely flustered Sharia embarrassingly admits that he has never learned how to dance either. Instead of disappointment, a thrilling spark brilliantly ignites in Cynthia's eyes at the exciting prospect of teaching her beloved giant yet another new skill. Leaping up from her seat, she brightly declares that she will personally tutor him in the highly elegant art of ballroom dancing. A soft, breathtakingly handsome smile breaks across his face as he graciously accepts her fiercely loving offer to teach him. The Viscount and Viscountess share a profoundly happy look, utterly thrilled by the incredibly beautiful bond rapidly blossoming before them. Gazing lovingly at her new fiancé, Cynthia's heart swells with immense pride, absolutely knowing they will completely overcome every single obstacle together. Hand in hand, the radiant young couple steps boldly toward their joyous, brilliantly shining future as a true, unbreakable family. Impressed by his rapid progress, the Viscountess joyfully praises Sharia for possessing a brilliant talent for both horseback riding and dancing. Shock wildly contorts Lady Cynthia's face as her mother dramatically offers to teach the towering boy an incredibly special, passionate dance. Humbly deflecting the immense praise, Sharia softly insists that her flawless teaching simply makes everything easy to understand. Seizing the moment, the Viscount smoothly sweeps his wife into his arms, boldly declaring he will personally demonstrate the intimate routine. Blushing furiously at the unexpectedly sensual display, both teenagers stare in absolute, paralyzed shock. A few peaceful days fly by, ushering the students back onto the bustling grounds of the Grand Academy. Cynthia internally screams, still deeply flustered while frantically wondering when anyone would ever actually use such an intensely romantic dance. Gazing up at the perfect, sunlit sky, she cheerfully notes that today offers the absolute ideal weather for horseback riding. Electric anticipation buzzes through the vibrant campus as the highly anticipated traditional dressage competition finally begins. While entirely optional, the prestigious equestrian event proudly invites all noble sons to publicly display their refined horsemanship. Excitement heavily thickens the air as the massive crowd eagerly awaits the arrival of today's undeniable star. Despite her own fierce riding skills, Cynthia happily steps back into the shadows, choosing to proudly spectate today. A fond memory surfaces, showing Sharia reeling in sheer panic when the ambitious competition was first suggested to him. Refusing to let the boy doubt himself, the Viscount confidently pushed his training, ensuring he mastered the crucial basic aids. Awed by his explosive growth, her father warmly admitted the young noble learned far faster than he ever deemed possible. Reassuring his anxious pupil, the Viscount promised that riding the highly experienced black steed, Noah, would guarantee a splendid academy debut. Bolstering his fragile courage, the loving family fiercely vowed to stand right by his side through the entire ordeal. Armed with their unshakable support, they officially encouraged their newly adopted son to confidently enter the grand fray. Snapping back to the present reality, the towering giant takes a deep, steadying breath to calm his racing nerves. Stepping in close, Cynthia tenderly sweeps his bangs aside, perfectly finishing his dashing, competition-ready appearance. A soft blush warms his cheeks as he sincerely thanks her, basking in her proud declaration of how incredibly handsome he looks. Radiating pure, majestic nobility, the gentle giant looks absolutely breathtaking in his tailored, immaculate equestrian uniform. Cynthia internally swoons, thoroughly mesmerized by the striking, flawless face completely revealed without his usual obscuring hair. Bubbling with absolute joy, she thrills at the realization that sitting out gives her the perfect excuse to relentlessly admire her beloved champion. A wave of curious murmurs instantly ripples through the gathered crowd as the imposing competitor makes his quiet approach. Flashing a brilliantly encouraging smile, she excitedly promises to fiercely cheer for him from the Guardian's viewing section. Overwhelmed by her unwavering devotion, a profoundly tender softness melts the sharp edges of his striking gaze. Lowering his eyes in sudden vulnerability, he painfully confesses his lingering guilt over constantly receiving such incredibly warm treatment. Cynthia swiftly shatters his dark doubts, fiercely declaring that she and her parents simply wish to cherish their precious future family. The beautiful, life-changing phrase forcefully strikes his heart, leaving him breathless under the bright academy sky. A harsh, thoroughly arrogant voice violently shatters their intimate, sunlit moment. Smirking with absolute disdain, Pierre aggressively demands to know why they are loitering around the competitor's staging area. Cynthia's eyes instantly narrow as she recognizes the obnoxious bully who so cowardly fled from them just days prior. She sharply notes that the pathetic noble only found his fake, arrogant bravery because he dragged a gang of lackeys along to protect him. Spitting pure venom, Pierre ruthlessly mocks the Duke's son, branding it utterly ridiculous to dress up when he allegedly lacks both a horse and basic riding skills. The cruel bully smugly twists the knife, loudly recalling how miserably Sharia sat in the women's section during last year's tournament. Reflecting on the previous year, Cynthia quietly confirms the harsh truth that they were merely second-year students back then. Digging into her faded memories of supporting her terrible ex-fiancé, Eddie, she realizes the towering boy remained completely invisible during that event. Her heart fiercely aches as she acknowledges he never possessed the means to compete until her family completely changed his world. A fiercely confident, unbreakable smirk curves Cynthia's lips, knowing full well that today's spectacular reality will absolutely crush the bully's pathetic assumptions. A stable hand confidently leads the magnificent black steed forward, enthusiastically announcing that they are bringing the horse right this way. Startled by the sudden arrival of the majestic beast, Sharia's eyes widen as a sharp flash of genuine surprise breaks his usual calm demeanor. Seething with bitter jealousy, an infuriated Pierre clicks his tongue and wrongly assumes the young lady must have prepared the expensive horse just for him. Panic rips through the bullies as his bewildered lackeys loudly demand to know why the neglected boy suddenly possesses a mount for the competition. Ignoring their pathetic whispers, Sharia tenderly strokes his massive companion and earnestly tells Noah he is counting on him today. Watching the arrogant gang sweat in sheer terror, Lady Cynthia smugly concludes that this spectacular display is a far more direct way to crush them than any words could ever be. Stepping forward with a radiant, affectionate smile, she lovingly holds out a beautifully crafted band and asks Sharia to please take her ribbon. This significant gesture honors the long-standing academy tradition where female students bestow ribbons upon those they have romantic feelings for to wish them absolute victory. Brushing aside dark memories of her pathetic ex-fiancé Eddie ignoring her amidst a sea of admirers, she beams with pure joy at finally sharing this intimate moment properly. Suddenly, a chorus of shrill, overly eager voices shatters their peaceful moment as a group of girls rushes in to aggressively force their own ribbons upon him. Her eyes narrowing in instant recognition, Cynthia quickly identifies the desperate intruders as the exact same malicious noble ladies who ruthlessly mocked them in the hallway. Shamelessly completely ignoring their past cruelty, the swooning girls desperately beg Lord Sharia to accept their expensive, custom-woven ribbons. An intense, bone-chilling silence falls over the towering giant as he glares out from beneath his bangs with absolute, terrifying disgust at their audacity. Watching the fickle girls fawn over her beloved, Cynthia dryly notes how quickly Eddie's former followers switched sides, realizing her ex-fiancé is nowhere to be seen in the venue. Completely ignoring the desperate crowd, Sharia gently accepts Cynthia's ribbon and wraps it around his wrist, vowing to win a prize solely for her sake. A massive wave of heart-throbbing shock violently strikes the mean girls as they practically faint from the overwhelming, undeniable beauty of his gallant gesture. Basking in his absolute devotion, a deeply moved Cynthia gazes up at her magnificent knight with a brilliant, overwhelmingly proud smile. Locked in a beautiful world of their own, she softly prays for his absolute victory while he firmly and confidently accepts her heartfelt wish. A fierce, unwavering intensity blazes within Sharia's sharp eyes as he steels his absolute resolve to utterly dominate the upcoming competition. Matching his fiery determination, her unwavering gaze perfectly reflects her absolute faith in his overwhelming, newly discovered equestrian talent. Patting the powerful black horse with total confidence, the magnificent noble smoothly asks Noah if they are ready to go. Turning to face the trembling bullies with a terrifyingly triumphant, pitch-black smile, Cynthia mockingly wishes everyone the absolute best of luck. A collective jolt of pure, unadulterated fear violently strikes Pierre and his pathetic gang as her murderous aura completely paralyzes them. Frantically sweating in absolute panic, the terrified lackeys aggressively shake Pierre, desperately demanding to know why the discarded Viscountess is making such a horrific, triumphant face. Having perfectly set the stage for their impending ruin, She confidently turns her back on the cowards and gracefully heads toward the spectator stands. A sharp, dangerously arrogant smirk finally breaks across Sharea's handsome face as the true, overwhelming power of the gentle giant prepares to be completely unleashed.